But again, if you're just joining us, in about the last 20 minutes, we saw a couple of people arrested. Where they were put in either handcuffs or zip ties. I want to try to widen out our coverage here as we continue to watch this scene unfold. Former Superintendent of Chicago Police, Garry McCarthy, is on the line with us. Mr. Superintendent, thanks so much for spending part of your time with us. I'm assuming that you're able to see a screen that is reflecting what's happening here. When we see sort of situations this unfold, what should we know?
Chris, actually, I'm not seeing it. So I'm relying on what you're telling me. There's a couple of thoughts, and I don't know exactly what's going on out there, but there needs to be a distinction that's drawn between ICE and U.S. border control. And if those folks are in camouflage, that's 99% going to be border control, not ICE.
That's very, very important. In fact, I'm going to encourage our producers to change our banner to say federal agents or federal activity in the East Side neighborhood, because you bring up a very good point. When these sort of flashpoints emerge in these very early minutes, Superintendent McCarthy, what should we be thinking about as we kind of see these unfold? And for neighbors who are wondering what to do, how does your eye look at this?
So my very quick thoughts are pretty simple, which is, based on what I've seen so far over the last month or so, I'm not sure that those individuals are trained in crowd control. And a lot of people really don't understand crowd control. And the best example I could give you is when we were doing the NATO summit all the way back in 2012, community meetings we put together beforehand. I got asked the question, are you going to use tear gas to control the crowd? And the answer is only if you can tell me how tear gas controls a crowd. Instead of controlling it, what you're doing is you've got, okay, I'm actually looking at it right now on TV. I can see a little bit of the remnants of what happened. But the problem is tear gas disperses a crowd. You'll take a crowd of 100 people and turn it into 10 crowds of 10 going in 10 different directions. That's not crowd control. So if you put your hands on somebody, you don't knock them to the ground, unless if you're using that justifiable force, you're making an arrest. So there's a lot of problems with what I'm seeing from the way that the federal authorities are handling this. And it was a different story when you saw the Illinois State Police come into Broadview, along with the Cook County Sheriff's officers. They were very controlled. They were in a line. They were not scattered all over the place. You didn't see pepper balls being fired and tear gas being thrown. So, you know, they have a lot to learn. Let's put it that way. And they should be relying on local police to do that.
Have you seen any evolution of that learning from the first few cycles of this through today?
Not yet. Not yet. The only thing that I've seen that is encouraging is there's kind of a step back. And I actually got a briefing the other day from ICE and the Illinois State Police. And the Illinois State Police really has it under, they know what they're doing. Let's put it that way. And it's a different scenario when they're handling it versus guys in camouflage. Let's put it that way.
Explain for us what the difference is for our viewers at home and for us. The difference, when you pointed out off the top of our conversation that given that they're in camouflage, it's more likely that they are border control, not ICE. What does that mean from a functional and practical perspective for folks on the ground?
Well, they don't seem to be trained in crowd control. It's really that simple. And unfortunately, that reflects in disorder. And the disorder brings more disorder. That's where people get assaulted, whether they're police officers or civilians, and that's not the way it should be happening. Let's put it that way. Professional policing can handle this. Let's put it that way. And that's what we saw from the state police and the Cook County Sheriff when they responded.
We're joined now on the line by Garry McCarthy, the former superintendent of Chicago Police, and we're watching these live pictures. We saw a couple of people arrested, Mr. Superintendent, a few moments ago. Is some of this here now what we're seeing now, if you're still watching on your screen at your facility, these are live pictures. We saw what we believed were a couple of arrests. There was a group of people that dispersed. They kind of came back, and then before it appeared the federal agents sort of left the scene, there was that disbursement of smoke, what you're talking about. We've seen so many incidences in the last few weeks of pepper balls being used and smoke being used in various methods for protesters who either live in that neighborhood, Mr. McCarthy, or who sort of scrambled to get there today because they want to sort of be conscientious objectors or protect individuals. What messaging do you have to the protesters who are seeing this unfold when maybe the federal agents that are in front of them aren't equipped to handle it, as you say?
Well, first of all, let's be clear. The protesters have to comply with the law. I think everybody's forgetting about that.
Right.
I think everybody's forgetting about that. And at the end of the day, you throw rocks or you throw bottles at the police, that's an assault, and you need to be arrested. And let's put that at the front of this. There are people who are purposely trying to cause these confrontations, whether it's Antifa or the people. And listen, we're experiencing this in Chicago. We saw it during the Floyd riots. Go back and look at the video from the confrontations at the Columbus statue. They were organized, just like they were during NATO, just like they were during the DNC. And they've been handled different ways. The DNC and NATO were handled the same way. The Columbus statue was not handled that way. The officers weren't equipped for it, and that was because of direction from City Hall.
Okay.
Cops can handle this, okay? But protesters do not get a free pass to assault people or cause property damage. Nobody is saying that. Let's get that out there.
But for folks who are protesting peacefully, who just want to sort of be there and be heard and be seen, who are not throwing rocks, who are not getting in the way, when you have Federal Agent Group A versus Federal Agent Group B, you need to know, right, that there's a group of people that are equipped to handle this, and there's a group that may be less equipped.
Yeah, but by the same token, the bad guys infiltrate those peaceful protesters.
Right.
And it's hard to tell the difference. Come on, let's get the facts out there.
Fair point. As we, again, if you're just joining us here at about 10 to the hour, you are looking here on the southeast side of the city in the east side neighborhood, 105th and Avenue N, not far from the Horseshoe Casino, a dozen blocks or so west of the Indiana border here, where at about 11 a.m. we started to see things unfold. In the last 20 minutes, we've seen 2 arrests and the disbursement of several gas agents to try and diffuse the situation. Unclear whether or not that was successful in so doing. Our Sarah Maki is on the ground there. We're going to hear from her in a short time. We continue to be joined by former Superintendent of Chicago Police, Garry McCarthy, who is watching this all unfold. Where do you see this sort of going? Will we be dealing with these same sort of scenarios unfolding in various Chicago neighborhoods in the same exact way for weeks and weeks, or are we seeing this sort of change in some way over time from either the protester standpoint, the police here locally, or the federal authorities?
Well, let's put it this way. Hopefully, like I said, the state police and Cook County Sheriff step in and handle the protests. But by the same token, let's be clear about this. There are people coming from all over the country to cause chaos. That is not being reported. And I could give you specific examples. During the Floyd riots, my right-hand guy, Bob Tracy, who's the chief of crime control strategies in Chicago, was in Wilmington, Delaware. And he was locking up people from Eugene, Oregon. Now, think about that for a second. If you live in Eugene, Oregon, are you going to go all the way to Wilmington, Delaware to protest, or are you going to go to Los Angeles or someplace on the West Coast? These people
okay, Mr. Superintendent, I need to hold you just for 1 second because we're going to resume our coverage over the air here in just a second. Stand by as we do that.
This is breaking news from CBS News Chicago.
Good afternoon. I'm Chris Ty in the CBS News Chicago newsroom. We continue to follow this unfolding story in Chicago's East Side neighborhood. You're looking near 105th and Avenue N, a dozen blocks west of the Indiana border near the Horseshoe Casino, where a short time ago we saw federal agents sort of face to face with a group of protesters here. We understand this all began at around 11 this morning, where there was some sort of altercation, some sort of car accident occurred. A vehicle was taken out of the scene. And then a short time later, 2 people were arrested. You see one of them arrested right there on your screen. Again, this was about 25 minutes ago. A second person arrested shortly thereafter. And then that black SUV, which is joined by a number of others, believed to be those of the federal authorities on scene, which we understand may be Border Patrol, not ICE. But again, we're continuing to figure that out. We have a reporter on scene. Then we saw this disbursement of smoke agents into that neighborhood, which kind of cleared out the crowd and allowed those federal vehicles to sort of exit the area. And that's where we find ourselves now, where the standoff continues. Again, I use the word standoff, but perhaps it's just more of a verbal altercation between federal authorities and either neighbors in that community, protesters from Chicago, or, as former superintendent of Chicago Police Garry McCarthy put it, perhaps folks who have traveled here from outside the area with various agendas or trying to be conscientious objectors. We just don't know. It is too early in this story. We have seen this sort of thing unfold in a number of Chicago communities of late. Superintendent McCarthy continues to be on the line with us today and help put some words to these pictures. Mr. McCarthy, can you kind of explain for us and reset what your largest thoughts are here as we're sort of in the early stages of this latest incarnation of federal agents versus people in these communities?
Well, quite frankly, what I'm looking at on the TV right now looks like almost a non-event, if you will. If there's 2 arrests, as you say, that's something that a patrol car could do from the Chicago Police. Whatever happened between those agents and protesters, or quote-unquote protesters, I don't know. But at the end of the day, this is being orchestrated by some people to cause chaos. And quite frankly, this is the politics of today.
It is the politics of today. And it is also
do not think that you get a free pass to assault a police officer.